All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this month's installment of Reverse Book Club. This is a fun thing that we've started in 2021 and have been continuing all year long. And that is where I read a book, and so you don't have to. And so, what we'll be going over today is a really fantastic, really interesting, very novel book called Pitch Anything by Oren Klaff. I think this book's probably about 5 or 6 years old. If you haven't heard it, feel like I've been very fortunate in doing these sessions because everyone I recommend, hey, make sure you go read this because this is one that is gonna have a pretty powerful impact on the way that you're thinking and approaching conversations, relationships, or those key critical moments throughout a real estate transaction when you're interfacing with someone else. So before we dive into the agenda, I want to encourage everybody, when we're talking about what this book is about, we're going to use the word pitch a lot. And so when you think of pitch, don't think of like these formal sales pitches like we're watching Mad Men and they're trying to land a new account. Think about them just as any opportunity to sell or influence others. So there's, again, a lot of opportunities for that to happen. And also just lean into this conversation because it's going to start a little bit heady. And there is a framework involved with this that I have not seen anywhere else. And that I have not seen anywhere else. So it's going to feel very different, but take what you like, leave what you don't, try to implement a few things as you work through this particular takeaway. All right, so the three things that we're going to do this morning is we're going to first focus on understanding the brain. So I promise it'll be quick, it'll be interesting, you will enjoy it, but we're going to have a little conversation around the brain. And then we're going to introduce an idea that this book is underpinned by called the frame. And then finally, we're going to talk about the actual structure and selling and influencing. We call that portion understanding the game. So let's dive right in here with the brain. So we're going to cover a few things for the brain, what's going on inside our heads, and then what exactly are we aiming for when we are pitching. So the brain for us human beings developed over the course of thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And it developed from the lower portion of our brain, which we are going to refer to as our croc brain or our reptile brain. And then that evolved into the midbrain. And then the modern day human has a neocortex, right? And so what are the functions of all of these different subsets of our own mind? Well, your croc brain is, or other times you'll hear it referred to as the reptilian brain. This is one that it's going to regulate your heart rate. It's going to regulate the level of adrenaline in your system. The fight or flight mechanism is deeply rooted in the croc brain, right? And so this one operates off of hunger and fear. Can I eat it or can it eat me? Right? Like that is the primary function of the croc brain. The midbrain is what manages social and spatial relationships, right? So this tells you the question that the midbrain would ask is, am I loved? Do you care about me? Right? Can I trust you? Those sort of social elements. And then it also helps, measure distance and tell us spatially where we are inside of a given framework or a given environment. The neocortex is the largest and most well-developed part of the brain. And this is where a lot of heavy thought, logical thinking, problem solving takes place, right? It's, why you get a headache across the front of your head, not deep in the middle of your head, is because your neocortex is where you're doing the really heavy lifting from the standpoint of your problem solving. So the initial framework that is applied, and probably the most revolutionary thing, is when you were talking about selling and influencing, right? So many times we're putting together a pitch and a process and a conversation and notes and talking points that are coming from our neocortex, right? These are really heavily analytical. We've thought out, we've handled all objections on the front end. We've done all of these things in our neocortex to problem solve in advance. And then we're going to go walk that solution to a customer, and then they're going to buy it. The challenge is, and what this book is puts forth is, it says the challenge is that everything, every decision, every conversation, every piece of everything that you encounter, right, as an individual, goes through your croc brain first, right? And so when we look at our croc brain, the number one thing that we are focused on there is getting and keeping attention. So instead of our thoughts going from our neocortex to their neocortex to their midbrain to their croc brain, it actually goes from our neocortex to their croc brain. So there's a massive gap in the way that we talk about what we're selling or what we're doing, and how it is received by the individuals on the other side. So they're receiving from the standpoint of, can I eat it or can it eat me, right? And that is a fear or prize scenario. And whenever we're talking to them about, you know, facts and figures and numbers and market rates, which there's all a place for in the pitch, we're going to bore them. Their croc brain is not going to find it novel. And that's the key word that we want to focus on when we are opening and expanding an opportunity to sell or influence another person, is we want to keep things novel, right? There is a reason that 100% of products, even the ones that have been on the shelves for 30 years, have the word new on them, right? New is the most used word in advertising. And the reason is because our croc brain, right, is drawn to movement, and newness tells us that there's change. Now, you know, 10,000 years ago, understanding what was changing was really important, because it could have been, hey, that shadow moving over there was a tiger that's going to come eat me. Now it is about opportunity, right? But the function of the croc brain is the same. It is looking for unique and novel things to focus on. And when it focuses on them, then the conversation can elevate up into the midbrain, into the neocortex with priority, instead of just getting passed to the wayside or going there with, you know, for what we'll talk about, like just too heavy of analytics, hitting with the analyst frame. So any questions about that? I know that's a really quick deep dive on neurology, but it is a very important basis for the book, because when we talk about this next thing, which is a really interesting concept called frames, understanding why people behave the way that they do, how they behave the way that they do, and how the croc brain influences that is really important to then leveraging it to get them to do what you want them to do. All right, so we have been using this word, and it gets used a lot in the book. It's called a frame. So we want to deep dive and understand, okay, what are these frames? What does it mean to set a frame? And then what does it mean to bust a frame, right? This is the three things that we're going to cover next. So what is a frame? Really simply, the best way I would describe it is these are going to be cues in the environment that indicate whether people or ideas are important. Strong frames dictate behavior at a subconscious level, right? And so these are, this isn't anything overt in the environment, right? It's going to be subtle subconscious cues that create behavior at the same level. So if we stop for a second and think about some of the frameworks that exist or frames that exist, if you get pulled over by the police and, you maybe elevates, maybe you, even if you're not doing anything wrong, right? You pass a car or pass a police car while you're going below the speed limit, right? You still look at the speedometer and maybe your foot hovers over the brake. That is an authority frame, right? So whether, from whether it's societal or experiential, we have a subconscious frame that is then triggered by the police car, the lights, the uniform, where we behave differently or we adopt a certain pattern of behavior, right? And that's what frames are going to help us guide. Same thing with a doctor, right? The example they use in the book is that the president is the most powerful person in the free world, and walks into the doctor's, is telling him what to do and how to do it, and where to stand and put on your clothes, take off your clothes, whatever it is. And so that's because whether it's the subtle cue of the lab coat or the experiential or positional authority of the doctor. And then same thing with the priest, right? You see the collar, you just want to start confessing. And so, while we may not in our industry have things that are going to be strong cues, as strong a cue as those are some of the big and most relevant examples. We want to make sure that we are understanding and looking for some subtle cues in the environment that are going to dictate things on a subconscious level. So there are three frames that you're going to encounter, and individuals will try to establish these for a sense of authority, for a sense of control, for a sense of protection. And your job as somebody who is going in to sell and influence, right, is going to be to bust these frames. And so the first one is the power frame, right? I have the power here, not you. We encounter this with clients all the time, and other people in our lives where they are going to, they're going to take either a positional piece of leverage and create a power frame around it, or they're going to take a transactional piece of power, like, hey, how many times have we heard a client, do this or do that. I'm the one paying you, right? So the power frame is the most common one that shows up. The other one is the analyst frame, right? And you'll probably appreciate that some of these start to match and mirror the DISC assessment, right? D's, I's, S's, C's. But the analyst frame is one where they're going to ask a bunch of super detailed questions and pull you down into really hyper specific stuff that is going to let that croc brain go back to sleep and really slow down the decision-making ability of the people in the mix. So an example of this might be, getting a ton of questions about, the crown molding, or whether or not we could take out this wall and get the kitchen opened up into the living room or whatever on like a first walkthrough or whatever, right? And so, we might focus on breaking that, or maybe even a different one would be when we're doing a buyer consultation and they want to deep dive into all of the market stats and understand our expectation on interest rates and all these other things, right, that are going to steer the conversation away from, hey, what's your motivation? How can I help you get into the home of your dreams? And then finally, the time frame. This is where someone is going to try and control the time variable and limit your ability to do what you've come to do, which is convince them to make a decision or influence them in a specific direction. So these frames are what individuals will put up, maybe not even in response to, but that you will encounter as you go out on your journey of selling and influencing. So what do we do to bust those frames? Well, we are gonna, for a power frame, we're gonna engage in some small acts of denial or defiance, right? And so this can be really scary, but it can also be a lot of fun. So the example might be that somebody is, you've given out a bunch of information, you've given out your buyer consultation packet or your listing presentation, and you said, hey, I'm going to walk you through everything here. And the person who's exuding a power frame is going to start flipping through aggressively and start asking questions about things on page 7, or start asking questions about, hey, I noticed you have nothing in here about your commission, whatever it is, right? So they are trying to put forth a power frame that it is in fact not your presentation, it's their presentation that you're going to get to be a part of. And so the example they use in the book that's a good way to deal with this is you just take back the materials, right? And you want to do it in a joking and jovial way, but ultimately do it, right? Because you're going to be taking the power frame back from that individual, because that's what they're trying to do to you. And social cues and the fact that you're doing it, they probably are not going to put up a fight, especially if you roll it up inside of a joke, or some bit of humor. So busting the power frame, we do small acts of denial and defiance. And so look for opportunities to do that when you're dealing with high D personalities, or when you're in a position that you can take something back or take something away, that puts authority back in your court. So with the analyst frame, when somebody wants to get into the weeds too early, right? There's always a time and a place where due diligence is appropriate. But typically when the analyst frame shows up, it's because that person is either trying to kill the conversation with a bunch of heavy questions, or it's just their nature. They're a C, they're highly conscientious, and they really want to dig into the numbers. So when you encounter an analyst frame and you start getting questions about, super specific stuff during your conversations, zoom out, give a high level response, and then to demonstrate authority and control over the subject matter, and then focus back on the relationship. Hey, listen, we're here. I'm here to help you guys, get to Florida, right? We're here to sell this house, and I want you to trust me to do it. Things that are happening in the market, or things that will happen in the market, or happen with interest rate, or happen with buyers, or happen with the economy, like those are all things that we will navigate as we go through this process. But right now, I want you to trust me and my marketing to get your house sold, right? And so, that is going to let them know that yes, there are a number of different factors that are going to impact the sale of their home, and we are not going to solve them or root them out at the kitchen table, right? And so then you can zoom out, high level, broad strokes, and then dive back in on the relationship and reactivate the croc brain. Another great way to bust an analyst frame is to start telling a story that has you as the center of attention. They gave some great examples in the book, and I think that this is, maybe a 200 level strategy. But if you're able to, hey, how will the interest rates and the economy impact, everything around the sale of my house, and how many buyers are out there? And they say just switch gears hard with a really good story that has you at the center of attention, right? And it can be anything, as long as it's authentic and as long as it's real. And that's going to shift the light back to you, allow you to demonstrate some authority. And then when you re-engage, when you re-engage with the questions in the high level and concise conversation, do it right before the hook point, right before the climax of the story that you're telling, and leave that off to the side for the end of the conversation or the end of the meeting. Because remember, this whole thing is about getting and maintaining attention. And so when somebody goes into an analyst frame, they're telling you, you no longer have my croc brain's attention. My neocortex is taken over, and I'm really interested in how much it's going to cost to replace the carpet, right? Instead of, hey, right now's the opportunity. There's a window closing in the market, and I have to get this house on the market tomorrow. And whether the carpet's $1,500 or $2,500, the house needs to be sold in the next 6 weeks, right? And then the time frame, hey, you come in for a listing appointment or buyer consultation, and somebody hits you with, hey, I've only got 30 minutes, right? And we know this, it's a classic bold script, right? Hey, you got a minute? Or no, I don't. Or, oh, great. That's, I only need 30 seconds, right? Your response to a time frame is just shrink the variable, right? And so if somebody says they only have 30 minutes, you say, great, I only need 20. If somebody says they have 30 minutes, you're like, that's great. I've got my next appointment in 15. Let's sit down, hammer through some of this, get to know each other a little bit better, and figure out what our next steps are, right? And so you're always, reestablishing yourself as worthy of attention and in control. Now, another really powerful thing, it's not necessarily used in busting the power or analyst or time frames, but it's very important to incorporate, is prize framing. So when you put yourself as a scarce resource, right? Individuals run from threats and they chase things they want, right? And so you're either attracting, right, or repelling. And if you are positioning yourself as a prize and as a scarce, unique resource, that's the 10 out of 10 here, right? And so, there are agents in this market center who will, put themselves in a position to say, I'll have to review. I'm not positive that I'm in a position to take on new clients right now. Oh, wow, you work with a limited number of clients. Oh, wow, there's people, there's a waiting list to have you sell their house, right? And that, we all know that's very much not true, but there's a positioning of scarcity from a resource standpoint, and it keeps them as the prize, right? It's not about buying or selling a house. It's about working with me, right? We'll talk a little bit more about how that applies here in real estate. Before I go on to the actual structure of this selling/influence conversation, any questions about frames? I know that's a obscure concept, but want to make sure if there's anything to clarify, I can. All right. So let's talk about this game of the pitch, right? And remember, you're not going to be at the front of the room with a flip chart or a PowerPoint presentation and working through step by step of a pitch. This is a framework, a guide for you to make sure that when you're having really important conversations where you need really important decisions to be made, that you're structuring things in a way that allow you to capture attention, get that croc brain fully engaged, right? And then firing on all cylinders in the direction you want. So we're going to talk about how we're going to structure this pitch and then how we are going to execute that pitch. So the framework that they offer, I'm a sucker for acronyms. So, they got me hook, line, and sinker here, full attention on making the pitch strong, right? And so this should come as no surprise. The first thing that we're going to want to do is set the frame, which is putting ourselves in a position to hold attention, right? So That may mean wresting the the authority away from an individual who has it. It might be regaining, knowing that we're dealing with an analyst, a high C. We're going to want to, restructure things right out of the gate to make them feel comfortable with the idea that we're here to talk about relationships and results. And then finally, make sure that we have attention. You can't hold attention until you have attention. Second thing we're going to do is tell the story. So, and whether it is the story of the market, the story of the neighborhood, the story of that buyer and where they want to be and who they are and what their life's going to look like, we want to keep things in story form, right? And go back and watch the great reverse book club that we did, I think back in April, which was Story Brand. And it talks about how to actually tell really good stories. So when we tell stories, we keep people out of their analytical mindset, right? Remember the bold law, logic makes you think, emotion makes you act, right? And stories are emotional, right? And when we see that show up, I mean, it was funny as going through the book, I was thinking about how, everything on television, everything on Netflix is very emotional, right? And even the things that you think would be hyper analytical or critical thinking, like a documentary, what has happened to documentaries in the last 10 years is that they have taken an analytical subject matter, like a documentary, and made it incredibly emotional by telling the stories of the people behind it, right? Chef's Table, Wild Wild Country, Tiger King, right? Like these documentaries are supposed to be heavily analytical, really super specific. What happens, there's an incredibly emotional episode of Chef's Table about monks making cheese. I mean, it should be about like how cheese works, but it's about the monks, because at the end of the day, we respond to things emotionally. So if you are talking, make sure you're telling a story. So then revealing the intrigue is the third part. And so this is going to get the croc brain really fired up, right? And it is where we create the concept of risk or danger, right? And so as you're getting into your story, you want to make sure that you do not lose them. We want to make sure that we're creating tension, that there is something to lose, right? Whether it's the windows closing on the market as a seller's market, inventory is going up, not at an aggressive rate, but as we hit seasonality, like things are going to slow down. Or for buyers, Fed's meeting next month, there's people rolling on and off the Fed Reserve Board. There's a really good chance that interest rates are going to be a point higher 12 months from now, which is going to hurt affordability and the overall value of your home, right? That risk of like, that's intriguing, because I don't get that on the news, right? I get that in the story where you tell me, well, here's what the next 12 months could look like. Next, you move into offer the prize, right? You are the prize. Don't ever lose sight of this in your conversations, in your pitches. You are what they're buying, right? In a heavily commoditized industry, there are 15,000 realtors in Northeast Ohio, right? There are companies where I can, buy a house or sell a house with a click. That's not what people are showing up to the listing appointments or the consultations for. They're showing up for you, right? And you make sure that they're buying you first and foremost. And so as you tell the story, reveal the intrigue, how are you positioning yourself as the one and only, the exclusive, the right person to get the job done, right? Because when we talk about what they'll do with the market, what they'll do with this person, that person, the other person, we are not positioning ourselves as the prize. But when it's, hey, I have a mortgage partner, I have a title company, I have home warranty protection, I have this, then it all goes through you, right? It's not that they can go get these things, it's that you can provide them. And so again, nail the hook point. Emotion makes them act. This is where we are going to work to get them to make the final decision based on emotion, right? Emotion, logic makes them think, emotion makes them act. And people will buy when they are fully emotionally engaged. And so if you ever get the objection, we just need more time to think about it. We're going to call you, once we've had a chance to sleep on it, right? We've lost the croc brain. They are in analytical brain. The croc brain is not going to be there 9:30 tomorrow morning whenever they're having coffee with their wife, trying to decide whether or not they are going to sell the house. That is 100% the neocortex and 100% what we want to avoid. And then finally, get the deal. So the recommendation in this book is, master the art of pulling away, right? And this also shows up in bold as the takeaway close. And so, you might say, hey, listen, if you're not ready to move forward, it might not be right for us to work together, right? And then we're exciting the croc brain with the idea that something can be lost, that you can be lost, right? And so when we master the art of pulling away just ever so slightly, we can capture a lot more business, right? And a lot more deals and a lot more signatures. Because alternatively, right, if we don't have a way out, we will pull down this beautiful frame of power and authority that we have established by coming across as needy or desperate, right? And so again, just like those small acts of denial or defiance to bust up a power frame, there's a lot of art to pulling away, right? And making, taking the paperwork off the table to say like, hey, listen, if we're not going to do this, we're not going to do this. And so that is very much something that you would want to practice, and that's the great thing about this. Like, as you go through the day to day, you go get your coffee at Starbucks, you catch up with a girlfriend, whatever it is that you're going to do today, hopefully go on some listing appointments, just observe, see if there's a frame in play, see which brain is engaged in which conversations. Don't even try to do anything yet, right? Start with awareness and just look at what's happening in the world around you. See if you can identify anything that is, on a power frame, an authority frame, a time frame, or if you see anybody, really activating a croc brain. And then just try little things. Like if you have a really bossy friend, try and execute a small act of denial or defiance. See what it does to them, right? You're making plans this weekend, and somebody, you got the friend who's never committing. See if when you pull away and say, hey, well, maybe it's not right. Maybe we're not going to hang out this weekend. I'm going to go firm something else up. See how quickly you can bring them back to the table, right? There's a million ways to practice that aren't related to your business. But if you capture this framework and really put it forward, and really look for it, then start to implement piece by piece by piece, you're going to be, I think you're going to be really impressed or surprised with how much of this stuff works in an exponential way, right? Just one small tweak to the way that you are engaging with people at the table is going to make one big difference in what they do at the end. So wrapping up around the pitch, there are 3 phases of the pitch that, those 6 steps are going to roll into. And I want to make sure, this is going to be an easier framework if you're just looking for what do I need to do. So the first thing is you introduce yourself and the big idea. If they already know you, you want to recapture, a little bit of authority by, don't be afraid to reintroduce yourself. One of the great things that I took away from this was your audience doesn't need your full bio, right? And so when people are, you'll see it whenever you're at an event, somebody's getting introduced and they start, oh, this guy went to college in Mississippi and then he worked on a barge and then he became the barge manager. And then now he owns the whole damn company. And in the last 10 years, he's done these 7 things. What happens there is that it all just blends together. Like people will take the average of the accomplishments in your bio. And so when you introduce yourself, you pick a you pick a time period, and then you say, this is the thing that I'm most proud of, or this is my biggest accomplishment. So then they get one really high watermark, right? Like, hey guys, my name is Mike Repasky. I've been with Keller Williams for about going on 3 years now. And my biggest accomplishment is Scott Phillips came to my presentation this morning, right? Like that's huge, right? And then people are like, wow, yeah, that's a big accomplishment. And that is the only thing that they're going to know about me. They're not going to know what I've done for the last 15 years and then average that all out and forget and misremember and all that. So, hey guys, super excited to sit down with you today and talk about listing your home. I know we've known each other for a while. My name is Michael Repasky, and I've sold 30 homes that I've listed, all 30 homes that I've listed this year. Wow. Okay. That's powerful, right? It's not 17 or 25 years of real estate experience that matters. It's like, hey, I sold 30 listings in this market. And after that, you're going to explain your secret sauce, right? Which is, this is how I get done what I get done. It is really, really important that you hit your unique value proposition. And if you're like, hey, Mike, that sounds awesome, what exactly do you mean by unique value proposition? We have some great recordings on the YouTube page where I believe Lincoln Coverdale and one other agent in our last 2 Ignites have done a session on how to really build that and make it authentic. But what are the things that you do that other people don't do? What are the things about you and your experience that create this unbelievable amount of scarcity, this unbelievable opportunity to go win in the market because they have you? All right. And then the third thing is to offer the deal and make sure that they are clear they get you, right? So, hey, I am interested in being in business together. And I want you to know that, when we sign this paperwork together, you're getting me. You're going to get, and with me comes whatever it is, right? Lenders, title, roofers, 25 years of experience, whatever you want to do. Right? But make sure they know that they are hiring you. And you have to, as we so often say, we have to ask for the business, So describe for your client who is dissatisfied with the current offerings that your strategy is a new approach, has these benefits, unlike everybody else. Remember, guys, we are dealing with a really big environment in terms of how many people are in our multiple listing service and the number of people that somebody can buy a home with. So in the secret sauce component, we want to mix tension and desire like this. If we can get a good push pull, hey, work with me and great things happen. Hey, don't work with me and bad things happen, right? Both elements of the croc brain get triggered and you have attention to the moon, right? And simple phrases like, somewhere in your listing presentation or somewhere in your buyer consultation, like, hey, there's a real possibility that we're not right for each other. But if we're able to do business together, you guys are going to make a mint on the sale of this house, right? Or you guys are going to have the most pain-free process in buying a home, right? And that puts the other person in a position to say, why wouldn't we be right for each other? Like, what do I need to do? Right now they start to chase a little bit because they know there's a prize there. And then realtors are a commodity that they can get anywhere, right? So what makes us special, right? There are countless industries or product groups that should be ubiquitous, right? But people still make decisions for high end, low end, mid end, whatever it is, based on how well those things are positioned, either from scarcity, risk, or reward, right? Like clothing is a great example. Like, we all could just be wearing, great jumpsuits, right? But there's a reason that we go choose this outfit over that outfit, or this brand over that brand. And when you start to think about yourself in the same way, we have to position ourselves in the same way. So I'm going to wrap up today with a conversation about things to avoid, right? So maybe you say, Mike, really interesting stuff. Seems like a lot. I'm not going to implement any of it. Okay, fine. I mean, that's your prerogative. Sometimes what we don't do is more important than what we do, right? And so it's really critical that if you do nothing else, stop doing these things, right? Because the number one thing that kills a pitch is desperation, right? If you want it too much, you'll never get it, right? And so that's where if you can look back at your past 10 conversations, 10 opportunities to influence, 10 deals, and say, hey, I am, why didn't things go the way that I wanted them to, right? Were we leaning in a little bit too much and begging a little bit too much and making things a little bit too easy to be said no to? And is there an opportunity to master the art of pulling away a little bit, right? Master the art of being unavailable, right? Because desperation will kill more pitches than anything else, because it's a complete submission to the other person's power frame. Talking too much, also very dangerous from a pitch standpoint. When we start to get into long soliloquies about anything, right, we're encouraging thought to go from the croc brain up to the neocortex and just live there to get rolled around, right? And we all know the old adage that anyone who talks too much is probably lying. So words are currency, right? Don't overspend. Don't overspend on your words. Don't be too vague. So it's important to be able to stay high level, but you want to have some command of the information demonstrated so that you're not just being vague. How's the market? The market's good. How's the market? The market's bad, right? Like those are vague things, right? Or how's your business? I'm busy, right? Like that's vague. How's your business? I have 3 listings coming live next month and 2 more appointments next week. All right. Like that's not nitty. I didn't get where, I don't know the zip codes that they're in. I don't know the prices that they're in, right? It's high level and it's concise. And I have an idea that this person is having a really good run at listings. Good. I understand that. So don't be vague. Be high level, but don't be vague. Don't go too slow, right? And this kind of ties in with talking too much, because the more you talk, the longer you talk. But remember, the croc brain is driven, it is obsessed and drawn to movement and change, right? And so as we work through the conversation, we want to keep stimulating that. And if we go too slow and we're just, okay, and then here's the 3rd week of marketing, and here's the number 7 social posts that I'll do and things like that, you are really slowing that croc brain down and it is going to sleep. And then similarity to other pitches, I think that's one of the best things, this book really fulfilling its own model, is that it's such a novel and different approach to the conversation around selling, influence, pitching, whatever you want, that if we adopted all of these principles, there's a really good chance that it would look unlike anything else anyone else is doing from a listing presentation standpoint, or from a buyer consultation standpoint, or from whatever we're doing from our business to lead generate, right? And so if we get ourselves into a different subset of their mind where we are unique, we're novel, there's all these other realtors, and then there's Allison, right? Like that is really powerful. And then don't lose frame control. frames do not blend together. Like these subconscious cues in the environment that dictate our behavior do not blend together. They do not mesh or meld, they collide, right? And so we as humans will always be putting things into hierarchies. And whenever you get a frame of authority or power, somebody else could be trying to attack it. So keep your guard up, right? When you're in the conversation, those are going to be all the things that, look, if you do nothing else, do a little bit less of these. And I think that you'll get more of what you want when you want it from a selling and influence standpoint. All right, guys, that is what we have this morning with respect to our reverse book club, but I will open it up to questions about that or about anything else, candidly, if anyone has any. And feel free to use the chat box as well if you're not in a position to unmute. All right, gang. Well, hearing none, I will just assume that I've left you all floored and that your jaws are on the floor. You've dropped your phones or your computer devices, and that we've just really knocked it out of the park this morning. So thank you so much for being here. I hope that you all had some solid takeaways. If you want to go back and revisit any of this, it will be posted on our YouTube channel. The Keller Williams Greater Metropolitan Training page. And of course, if any of you are interested in following up or having another conversation about this or any of the other stuff that we've covered on these, please do let me know. And that's what I'm here for. So if there's nothing else, guys, we will go ahead and play some music and power this thing down. Have an awesome Friday and an awesome weekend, team. Thanks so much for being here.